Good evening, and welcome to Armageddon Live, Series 2, Episode 27, More Random Stuff, on this 15th of May, 2020. I'm your host, Daniel Decrypted. Well, I guess the one thing I can say is that I have moved. I'm set up in my new place, and it's different, so we'll see how this goes. Yeah, I haven't, since I've just got here. Yesterday was unpacking stuff, and today has been a little busy too, so I didn't really get anything new done that I wanted to get done. My situation's a little different too. I don't have a door that I can close, so... Oh. You're probably hearing a telephone ring. Yes, so things are a little different, since the noise is probably going to be a little easier for it to be heard, background noise. But anyway, I'm here. So, as I said, I didn't prepare anything, so we're just gonna, and I noticed that the last presentation I did on the 13th, which was supposed to be for the 14th, yesterday, that's episode 26, I lost my connection. So, the connection at the previous place I was staying was not so great. This connection seems to be very good here, so the quality should be better here. Well, anyway, the thing I was saying is it cut out probably about halfway through what I was saying. So, I guess I might as well continue from where, or roughly where I was talking from before. So, actually, I guess after I'll be able to find out what this sounds like too. So let's put myself off to the side, and then we'll go and look at what things are like here. I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm listening to my father talking on the phone, and so I'm getting distracted. But yeah, so let me put myself down, and so here we go. This is what we were looking at the last episode, and I had looked at oh, what am I doing? I'm getting mixed up. Yeah, so this is what we'd been looking at last time. And well, the structure is there, but I don't remember where it got cut off. I know it was during this, talking about this thing. The final thing I was supposed to be saying is that this structure seems to give some indication of how we are supposed to become what Christ wants us to become. And that's by personal instruction, daily communication with Christ. Just like in John, we have this personal communication between Christ and Nicodemus, and Christ and the Samaritan woman. And this leads to the point, because by behold we are changed, this leads to what John the Baptist states in the center, which is, He must increase and I must decrease. But then this seems to give the idea that you get what happens on the outside when this happens. And that's talking about a wedding feast. It's talking about a judgment. But these are things that are connected to the reality that we are living in now. There is a judgment happening, and there is a marriage that happens between Christ and his bride. So I mean, this seems to give that if you want to be part of the bride, if you want to be joined to Christ at this time during this judgment scene, then you really need personal instruction. You need to be spending time with Christ, so that just as Christ put others first, but just as he became a servant to all, then if we want that to happen to us too, then we need to be spending that time with Christ. We need to be growing close to him, more like him. And anyway, that's my take on this, because this structure obviously means something. I mean, you don't just write things like this. You have this repetition of the miracle in Canaan, a miracle that is wedding feast, but also it's the fact that it's a miracle that occurs at a distance. And we know that that exists now too, because Christ is in heaven and his bride is on the earth. So there is a separation between between Christ and his people. And as I said, it is known that Christ does have a bride, and there will be a marriage at some point. We do know that according to the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7, there is a judgment that is happening right now. Well, of course, in Daniel chapter 8 too. 8, 9, 11, 12, all of these chapters state this. So, anyway, just in case I don't remember exactly where it cut it off in the previous episode. So just to make sure that I cover that up, that's what I get from this. That's what I seem to see that's being spoken of here. Anyway, so what else? Well, the next piece I looked at that I know was cut off is right there. You go. So this was the other thing I started talking about on Wednesday. On the, what is it again? It's the 13th? Yes, the 13th. Episode 26. This is what I started to talk about too, but this got cut off completely. I never even got here. Cut off halfway through the previous thing we were just looking at, and actually this is not the first picture. There we go. Here we go. So this is the history that you see in Daniel chapter 11. First you have the kingdom of Persia, then you have the empires of Alexander the Great and the Hellenistic kingdoms of his successors. Then you have the history of Rome and the Jews, that interaction that happens there. Then after that you have the pre-1798 papacy. That's 1123 through 40a. And then you have the post-1798 papacy. But the interesting thing about this is, if you look at this, you get a chiasm or structure there because of this reason. So verses 11 through 15, they talk about the king of the north and king of the south. But verses 23 through 40a also talk about the king of the north and the king of the south. Right? In those verses, it actually mentions the king of the north and the king of the south. It's interesting that in verses 16 through 22, no mention is made of the king of the north or the king of the south, even though you know it's the king of the north. Yes, of course, you'll have to wait for other episodes to see why we know all this. But the interesting thing now is that when you look at verses 40b through 12:3, you have Christ who appears there. And you also have this king of the north. Well, it's king of the north, but I believe it doesn't call him the king of... I may call him the king of the north. But if you look at the story that's being told there, and you compare it with history, it's actually history that happened to Cambyses. I think it's Cambyses II. Anyway, it's the son of Cyrus the Great. According to the history, Cyrus's son, Cambyses, he went down into Egypt and he fought against them. He overcame them. Then he received some sort of message and he had to run back to Persia, to the capital, because the story was that they were there was a coup. There we go. There was a coup amongst the, I believe it's the lords or the royalty. No, what's it called? The nobles, I guess. There, yes. It's the nobles. The nobles were revolting against him, and so he ran back in an attempt to try and save his kingdom, but apparently he had killed the sacred bull of Egypt, and I can't remember what the name of it is now anyway. But they killed one of the sacred bulls of Egypt. It's the bull of Memphis, if I remember correctly. And he was told because he killed the sacred bull that he would die before he reached home. And naturally he didn't believe that, but he ran home, and before he had when he got into Palestine, from what I remember, it would have been somewhere around the city of Medigo. When he got around the city of Medigo, then he somehow stabbed himself, and he ended up dying from that. It poisoned. He got poisoned. What's it called again? He got poisoned anyway from that stab. It didn't heal, and it just festered and anyway, he died from it. There we go. It got so infected that it poisoned him, and he died from it. And of course, when he killed the bull in Egypt, they said that he would reach the capital. And it says, according to the story, that actually when he got into Palestine, he realized that a number of cities had been named by that name of the capital. And so when he got, because he said, oh, well, that means I'm going to reach home. But then he realized, oh, it wasn't talking about my city by that name. It was talking about another city. And so he just got into Palestine and died there. But that's basically a copy of what happened, the story that's told in Daniel 11. He goes down into Egypt, he overcomes it, comes back up, and he dies. So you can see then that the history of Persia, specifically in this case of Cambyses, is being copied over into the upper section, into verses 40b through 12:3. But that actually occurs too when it comes to Cyrus. Because if you follow, here's going to be a very quick explanation of this. But according to Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, kings are equal to kingdoms. Now, in the case, we have an example of this when Daniel is talking to King Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2 of Daniel. He says, you are the head of gold, right? And then he says, another kingdom will come after, and then the silver is another kingdom after you, right? So that implies then, because Nebuchadnezzar is not the last king of Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, so the next kingdom would actually be several kings after him. So it's making this equivalence that you, a king, are equal to your kingdom, you being like essentially the greatest king, the example, or the well, I guess biblically you could call him like a type of that kingdom, right? So if we take this over to Persia, or we take this over, yeah, we take this over to Persia in chapter 8, then we have this equivalence that the ram is equal to the kingdom, and who would be the greatest king, or the ram, which is Persia, I mean, the ram, which is equal to the kingdom of Persia, but what king would you put as an equivalent or a representation of that kingdom? Well, a natural king, a uh, natural not guess, or something that springs to mind anyway, is Cyrus the Great. I mean, he's called the Great because he's the one who set up the kingdom. But if you make that equivalent, then you have, okay, so Ram is equal to Cyrus. But how does the Bible describe Cyrus? It says, you are my shepherd, you are my anointed. And who is actually described as the shepherd and the anointed of God? Christ. So we then have this equivalence that Ram is equal to Christ, right? Oh yeah, it's equal to Cyrus, right? And now let's jump into Revelation. What does it say in chapter 16 of Revelation when it's talking about the seventh plague? No, it's not the seventh plague, sixth plague. In the sixth plague, it says that the waters of Babylon are dried up to make way for the kings of the east. All right, and in Revelation, it's always talking about Babylon. Come out of her, my people. Right. So God's people are in Babylon. Isn't that the story of the book of Daniel? Historically, God's people were taken into Babylon. God's people are in Babylon. How do they get out of Babylon? Cyrus the Great comes along and dries up the river and sets God's people free, and they go back to Jerusalem. So Revelation is using the same imagery. It says that the waters were dried up to make way for the kings of the east, because that's how Cyrus got into Babylon. He dried up the rivers, and then he could walk underneath the wall and get into the city and then take it and then set God's people free. So Revelation uses the same imagery, and who would then be the one who saves God's people? Of course, it's Christ. So Christ is being compared to Cyrus in the book of Revelation. And as I said, Ram equals Cyrus, which equals the anointed, and shepherd, which is Christ. Once again, so you have here then, because in Daniel 11, at the end, you have everybody surrounded Jerusalem, right? That's the mountain on which the temple sits, in which the judgment happens on the Day of Atonement. And so that you have all of you, when you put all these little pieces together, well, of course, I just told you too that Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 say that the judgment is the last thing that happens. So these things all go together, and you get the world in the personhood of the king of the north is coming to Jerusalem and surrounding it. Everybody's being drawn to the judgment that's happening, and of course Christ is in the middle of that judgment. I don't know, I think I probably just said so much that you're probably blown away by this. But anyway, this was what you were supposed to. Maybe not so much detail. Maybe I didn't put as much detail, but this is what you were supposed to get from that. and it got cut off. So anyway, yes, knowing all this information, then you get this chiasm that comes out. So you have this, well, oops. So there you go. You have this typical Cyrus the Great and the antitype. What was it? What did I say now? Did I do the wrong thing? Type and antitype. Well, anyway, you have Cyrus, and the real thing is Christ. And then you have Cambyses, and the real thing in verses 40b through 12:3 is actually Cambyses, is the king of the north. So yeah, so I probably talked your ear off. I hope someone will. I mean, if anybody has questions, then yes, definitely ask questions. As I said, most of this will be explained later. Well, I should say, all of this will be explained later, but because nothing is prepared, I decided to give you a little peek. But I guess my peek turned out to be more than a peek, and so, so I guess it's probably a good place for me to quit now and say good night and God bless, and I hope this was interesting to you. I hope it was a blessing, and I hope to see you again. I gotta try and rush tomorrow, I guess, and try and put some more slides up together so I can actually do a real presentation instead of just this hand wavy thing. But anyway, once again, I hope I will see you again tomorrow. God bless, and have a good night. Bye-bye.